Great. All right. Hi, everyone. If you don't know me, my name's Elliot. I come to St Andrews, and I love to help out on the tech. So I have a background in performing and recording and live sound and all that stuff. And I built this box for my band a little while ago, and they've now updated to a new box. So I'm leaving this here to try and help the guys to maybe come off of the very loud foldbacks. I don't know if maybe Roger's touched on this, but the problem with the foldbacks is they sound great for the musician because you mix them for the musician. But when they bounce off these stone walls and they hit the congregation, the guitar player, who always likes himself really loud in the mix, I know that because I am a guitar player and I like myself loud in the mix, is really loud in everyone's mix. And also it gets lost in the ceiling. So this is what we call an in-ear monitoring system. Monitors is another word for those massive speakers down there, also known as foldbacks. So it's how you monitor your sound. Forgive me if I'm proverbially teaching grandmother to suck eggs or anything like that. Great. OK, I'll keep teaching you. OK, great. So the idea of an in-ear monitoring system is, instead of having massive speakers blasting sound at you, you put tiny speakers in your ears. And then you mix your own sound, which is great for sound people because they then just have one job instead of having 6 jobs, which is mix this and mix 4 or 5 speakers. And then every musician, such as myself, can whack the guitar up really loud if they want, and it doesn't matter because it's in their ears and it doesn't affect anyone else. So it's fantastic. So I'm going to go through this little document which I made. I'll talk it out loud. I don't expect you to see it. But basically, if you want the instruction manual that I've made for this, just let Roger know. He can forward it on to you anytime. So that's the advantage, is instead of doing all of this and mixing lots of things, you just mix these speakers front of house and don't worry about the musicians because they mix themselves, which is fantastic. Big time saver. So what the musicians do is they plug into this array at the front. Does everyone know what a DI box is? Or should I talk you through that? I can talk you through it, no problem. So you might have seen a DI box that looks a bit like this. This is 2 sandwiched together. And basically, it takes an input, which is noisy and problem, and silences it, and sends what we call a balanced output. So instead of being noisy and disruptive, it comes out nice, stereo, gets rid of the noise because there's something called 60-cycle hum. Don't worry about that. Don't need to remember it. But instead of having these massive boxes strewn all over the stage, the DI boxes are attached to this. So that keeps your stage nice and tidy. Cool? So there are actually 4 on each rack on this device. So you've got an input on the left, which it says down here, input. Now, input means your instrument goes in, funnily enough. So you can see this microphone coming up the black cable is going into here. That's the same as if you were plugging into the stage box down there, but we're just going to put this between the instrument and the stage box so that the musicians can hear themselves. Cool? So you've got a microphone plugged in on the input, and then an output comes out of here. And that's the bit that we want to plug into the stage box down there. So that way, you're kind of thinking of, instead of plugging straight in, you're using this as a sort of linking box. Cool? Sure. So the stage box is a little thing down here, which has got loads of inputs on it, and they're all labeled as to what goes where. So it'll say, like, this one's for electric guitar, this one's for piano, etc., etc. Exactly. When we're using the big foldback speakers, all the instruments get plugged straight into the stage box, and that sends the signal to the sound desk. But because we're going to use this instead of the speakers, your instruments get plugged into the front of the DI, and then that returns the sound like a horseshoe, and then you just plug that into the stage box instead. Does that make sense? Now, the reason that we do it like that is so that you on the sound desk get a nice, clear signal that comes straight from the instrument or straight from the microphone, so there's no interruptions. But a DI box is brilliant because it actually has 2 outputs for 1 input, which means one output is going to the desk and you do your job. The other output, is coming out the back of this and is going into this hub up here. And that's where the musicians mix themselves. So they can hear themselves clearly, and you guys can hear nice and everything clearly as well. So We want to plug all of these in with the necessary instruments. And you might want to write down on your phone or on a bit of paper what's plugged in where. I like to leave a little whiteboard with the band so that they know who's what. So everything's numbered on here, so you can see there's little stickers that say like input 1, and then up here on the jam hub, it's got input number 1. 1 equals 1. Keep it simple. And they just write down who's doing what. So let's say that's a singer called John, John's mic. Then there's a second singer, we'll plug them in. She's called Jane, Jane's mic. I've plugged the guitar, which you can see here, straight in, number 3. The bass, straight in, number 4. And then they all just go out into the stage box, and hey presto, you have a band. Any questions so far? All good? I shall carry on. Do tell me if I'm going too fast. So the great thing about the hub is that it's got all these little dials on it with all the numbers that you see around the edge. So we've got 7 inputs on this, so you can plug 7 separate instruments in. You can actually double them up, but don't worry about that. We've got 7, okay? Now, the way that it works is you plug your headphones into this headphone slot, but then you have a problem, which is, oh, I can't move very far from the box. So Roger and I bought some of these extension cables, which are brilliant. So now I can go really far from the box and plug my headphones in, which is great because not everyone wants to gather around this box. It looks a bit strange, and everyone has BO, and it's horrible. No, I'm joking. So you plug yourself in, and then if you're number 1, let's say you're John's mic, and you think, I'm a superstar, I want to hear loads of myself, nice and easy, just turn number 1 up really high on your widget, and you've got loads of yourself. And then if John thinks that Jane can't sing, he doesn't have to get in a scrap with Jane, he can just turn her down on there. Brilliant. Fantastic. So this actually solves conflicts as well. No, I'm joking. It's fine. Basically, if you have a very loud vocalist with a big boomy voice, you can turn them down so they're not blowing your eardrums. And if you have a very nervous vocalist, they can turn themselves up. And they think, oh, I'm not so bad, actually. I might sing a bit louder. And as they do that, they gradually turn themselves down. So this is a great machine for getting people to confidently work together and bring out their sort of specialities, because they're not worried about this big speaker blasting them with sound, and neither of the congregation. Yes. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely, yeah. Yes, so it's got up to 7 separate inputs. So if you've got 7 musicians up here, all doing one thing each, ideal, because they've all got their own little mix here. And as long as they've plugged their headphones into the correct thing, then it will correspond. They can set whatever they want. So I could turn the drums off if I wanted to. Don't advise it, but I could. And the drummer can still hear himself or herself because they have got their own mix. So it's as if you're stacking up a foldback for each musician, and they get to set their own mix, but they do it themselves instead of bothering you. Get in. Time saver. Brilliant. Does that make sense? So they do. Sure, so they'll have to come over and go, I'll just give myself a little more bass. Oh, there we go, yes, that's better. So yeah, it does take a little bit of coming over and mixing and stuff like that, but I think most people, they tend to get a good feel and then they leave it alone when they're happy. And of course, the drummer is stuck behind a drum kit, so it's not so easy for the drummer to get up. So we have one of these, which is called a breakout pad, and I've got an extension cable for it as well. So wherever they sit, this goes over to where they are. They plug their headphones in the bottom, and they can control how much or how little they want to hear of everyone else. I'm hoping to get some more of these. They're quite rare because they're not in production anymore, but if I can, I will. All right, so if I go back to this module here, you might just want to come over and have a look. I think the camera's on this side, so we're going to try and keep that clear. But if you want to just gather around. So over here, we have this dial, which you can see has a picture of a guitar, and then it says mic. The microphone cable, you might know it as the XLR cable, is the one that we want to use because it's permanently plugged in. As you can see, there's one in each. And you guys being sound engineers, you know how gain works, right? Yeah? So I'll explain. Gain is basically another word for sensitivity. So if you've got a very timid singer with a very quiet microphone, you might need to give them a lot more gain so that you can hear them. So in order for them to hear themselves, you might need to turn this dial up. Makes it more sensitive. If you've got someone more like Brian Blessed, very loud and powerful voice, and you think you don't need a microphone, gain's going to have to go down like that, just to make the system more or less sensitive. However high or low the gain is on here doesn't affect your signal, which is the brilliant part. So you can set your own gain levels on the desk as work for you, and the musician can set their own on here. The problem with gain is, if you're nice and loud, but you want to turn the gain up, it does start clipping, which is where the wavelength is too large for the spectrum, and it starts to sound a bit fuzzy. But this system has this LED here, and that will go red if it's too loud. So it's good that the musician comes over and just, plays their bass or whacks the piano, and just keeps an eye on that, and maybe adjusts the gain gradually up or gradually down, until it's sort of as loud as it can be without becoming distorted. And they can do that all themselves, or you can come over and give them a hand. And once that gain is set, then they can set their levels just like that. And they also have a headphone master output. So if they like their levels, they like where everyone's sitting, but they're thinking, actually, overall, this is a bit loud in my ears, not a problem. They can turn it up or down with this one here, which you can see with the headphone. There's some little dials as well. So you can see they're actually 2-in-1, these dials. That's just to save space. So here's the microphone gain, which is this one. There's also an instrument input, but we won't worry about that. That's that one there, so I always tend to leave that switched off. And like I say, the headphone input is the inside here, and it says effects there. They can give themselves a little bit of reverb, which comes on the box, which is the sort of hello, echo, which might help them feel a little bit more like they're in the room. They can turn that echo effect up, or they can turn it down, just using that outside one. And it's always labeled, so if you forget which one's which, just have a look on the system. All right? It's a bit like turning the volume up and down on your iPod or whatever. It's much the same. But like I say, every musician has their own separate mix, which is the really cool part. They mix it all themselves, and you don't have to worry about very much at all. So when we unpack this, just beware, you need to plug these in at the back. Unfortunately, when it's all packed up inside the box, not everything's plugged in. So do make sure everything's plugged in, because it all needs power. You can see there's these lovely orange lights now. If you want to know about how all the cables connect, it's all on here. It's not really worth me going through it now, I don't think, because it's a little bit fiddly, but it's all on here. It's basically just get it from the source into the box using some connective cables. All right. What else have we got? So I've run through how the headphones work in these extensions. I've run through how we set levels, volumes, etc. The only other thing I guess I need to tell you is that if someone really doesn't like trailing one of these wires around, number 6 is connected to a wireless pack. Everybody go, ooh. Yes. And that's brilliant, because we have a radio transmitter on the back, which means if you have a worship leader who likes to run around and do mad stuff, they can, which is fantastic. If you don't want them to do that, have a word with them. So, any questions about the system at all? Anything you want me to recap, perhaps? Just let me know.
In the service, where would this box be on the stage?
Cool. Yes, so normally it sits in front of this pillar here, because that's quite a sort of central location, because you've got the piano in front of it, drums behind it, bass to the side. But because this is a nice long cable, and there are nice long cables that plug into it, you could potentially put it anywhere. If you wanted to hide it over there, you can. But most of the time, it sits there. Cool.
How often is it you get changed which number, where number 1 is going? Because I guess I'm not a stage box. Say, pretending it's keys, but not your keys.
Good idea. Thanks, Roger. Sorry, yes. So I think the question was, what happens if it gets chopped and changed and different instruments get plugged in different inputs? Yeah, good question. Good question, yeah. So as you can see on here, it's, we've got John's mic plugged into number 1, guitar number 3, bass guitar number 4. Every time you set it up, it doesn't particularly matter which number goes where. You can put bass guitar first and then vocals at the bottom, if that's what you want to do. It's just that everyone in the band's got to know what goes where, which is why it's good to write it down on the whiteboard and everyone takes a photo or writes it on their piece of paper. And then once you know where it goes, of course, you'll take the right output into the stage box. So if you know that guitar is number 3, I like to color match them. So I know guitar is plugged into number 3. There's the output for number 3. The other end is yellow as well, which is really helpful. And down in the stage box, the guitar input it does say, it has a little label on it. It says electric guitar. And you know to just plug it in there, and then it should correspond with what's on the desk. So it can be jumbled up every time. It's not that the vocals have to stay number 1 all the time. It really doesn't matter. All right. Anyone else? Any other questions? Anything to recap? That's a real whistle-stop tour of how it works.
Not at this stage.
No? Great. The only thing I've noticed with using the box is sometimes when you use earphones and on the mini auxiliary, if it's got 3 rings, that normally means there's a microphone on it. This doesn't tend to like it. So sometimes you get people plug the earphones in, they go, I can't hear anything, and you come over and you mess with the box and all this stuff, and you've spent half an hour trying to figure out what it is, and you go, let me look at your earphones, and it's got the 3 rings. No, I've just wasted half an hour. So it's really good to let your musicians know. Try not to bring in any earphones that have got the 3 rings. Ideally, it's one with the 2 rings, which is just a normal pair of earphones, no microphone on it. We've got a few here spare if anyone needs to swap them, but only a few. And another thing is, you notice that these are the instrument cables going in. These are XLR cables or microphone cables. They plug straight in the front. But if you do have an instrument cable, which looks like this, with the 1 ring, these are really clever boxes. They can also just take that, because they're these clever little inputs which have a hole in the middle, which means you can do one or the other, which is very cool. All right, great.
Elliot, could I just check with you for the keyboard and guitar?
Yeah.
Do you use jack leads to plug in?
Yes, yeah, definitely. So normally when you set everything up and there's foldbacks, one of these silver boxes comes with the piano and it goes into the stage box down there, which is fine because it's going to balance out the signal. It's going to sound nice. But when you've got a piano running into this, you don't need to use any of the silver boxes because you've got them on here. So you can just take one of the instrument cables that comes out of the piano and plug it straight into the box. So I've plugged it straight into number 5 there, and then I've put number 5 on the whiteboard, and it should go into there. Yeah, that's it, I suppose. So the guitars over here, they could take an instrument cable out, same as the piano, but they've actually got some XLR outputs built into the pedal boards, so you can just use a microphone cable, or an XLR cable as it's known. Yeah, either works, really.
And could you just show us an XLR cable for people that are less experienced?
Absolutely. Yes, yes. So I'll show you. This is normally the end that comes out of a microphone or out of an instrument. It's got that little hook because sometimes singers like to swing their microphone around, so they decided to put a little safety device in it. So that's the end that goes out of the instrument. And then you've got the other end over here, which has got the 3 pins in it. There you go. And then that just goes into there. You hear it and you feel it click. And then to pull it back out again, you just need to push that button. There we go. So that's an instrument cable. Sorry, that's an XLR cable, also known as a microphone cable. That's an instrument cable, or called a jack. Don't know why, just is. Okay.
I mean, did you just explain that about what they're listening to? Where's the thing that goes in their ear?
Sure. I mean, I can show you, actually. Did I bring my... Have you got some earphones? That'd be super. Thank you. Yes, ideally, you'd bring your own little earphones in. The question I get quite a lot of the time is, can I use Bluetooth? The answer, unfortunately, is no, because Bluetooth technology was invented in, I think, 1999. So being quite old, it's got this thing called latency, which is where you don't get an instant signal. It's actually delayed. So if we did plug Bluetooth in somehow, it would be a bit useless because you'd be a beat behind the rest of the band and it would sound awful. So the best thing to do is to use these hardwired extenders and then just plug the earphones in. as if it was your phone or your iPod. You know, you plug your headphones in and you go, and I'm listening to music, same thing.
So any old earphones that you normally...
Yeah, any old earphones. But if your earphones have got those 3 rings on the aux, unfortunately this device doesn't like them. It gets confused by that microphone ring. So if it's got 2 rings, brilliant.
2 rings.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really, they don't have to be in ear, do they? I mean, you know, some people
Yeah,
wear
absolutely, yeah. So my guitar hero, Paul Gilbert, he uses massive cans when he plays because he's got hearing loss, and that's absolutely fine. This will power your massive cans as well, as long as they've got 2 rings, not a problem. Yeah, that's quite all right. Yeah. Yes. Oh, yes. Oh, fantastic. Here we go.
So if I can just show you, sorry, they've all got mixed up. So this one here, you can see it's got the 3 rings, so that's one to avoid. Whereas these 2 over here have got the 2 rings, and so they're okay to use.
Yes, these ones that I'm trying and failing to untangle.
Yeah, and so it's much better to have them in ear. So that pair over there works fine, but it's an over ear rather than in ear.
Yes.
So plugging them right in will give you a better quality sound.
You'll get what we call a seal if you use in-ears, especially if, as you point out, if you've got some moulded ones. So I own a pair of moulded ones, but I have no idea where they are. I've lost them, unfortunately. But no one else can wear them because they're moulded to my ears, and it means when I stick them in, I can't hear a word you say unless you talk into my box, which is very, very cool. But as you can see, 2 rings just plugs straight in, and you chuck that in your back pocket. Off you go.
This is where talkback's really helpful. Because even if you use talkback,
So if we're using TalkBack as a sound engineer to talk to the
Yeah.
band, even in the setup now, if you talk into the speakers, they can't always hear you, or they can choose to ignore you.
Yes.
Whereas if you're speaking directly into their ears, they can all hear you,
Yeah.
whether they like it or not, and I don't think
Absolutely.
they can turn you down. No, because they can't turn you down.
Yes. So a talkback mic, as you say, is fantastic because you can shout at your musicians and tell them to be quiet. Or you can say, come on, I need some more bass so I can do the line test. Unfortunately, because this is a sort of third-party device, it sits somewhere between the stage and the desk. We can't plug a talkback mic in because you'd have to run a cable all the way from there. So it's actually possible, but you're going to have a very long cable. So in the meanwhile, there are some things that we can't do with this device. But we can do the main thing, which is the band can mix their own in-ears, and we can have the only sound in the house being front of house. But ideally, if we moved on to a new system that had it all incorporated, yes, then you could use a talkback mic.
Yeah, so this is a temporary portable system. It's very good, but it will be, if we go for this whole hog, then what we'll have, everybody will have their individual packs rather than plugging into a central hub, so you're not having to constantly go backwards and forwards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, a bit like that, but you probably have something on your mic stand in front of you, so you wouldn't have to keep it on your person and fiddle around with it. It'd be much better. But this is great for the meantime. So
Yeah.
it's a nice halfway house.
How does that make 7? I keep looking at it. Sorry.
Sure, yes. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then this one up the top. It's just laid out differently so that they could make it more compact. I normally plug the drums into that one because they sit at the back. All right.
stupid question about drums. There's only one drums now rather than drums left.
Yeah, exactly. Great question. So the drums actually have a special cable. There's a white one and there's a red one. So what it is it has an instrument output, just like that one, but you'll notice that this has 1 ring. That means it's mono, being 1 signal. But just like your earphones, which have 2 rings, this one has 2 rings, which means it's in stereo, because the drum kit is stereo output. And like I say, there's a white one and there's a red one, and it goes stereo to XLR. And you can just plug it straight into one of these, straight out of the headphone output of the drum kit, because headphones are in stereo, so just take that. And that way, the drums are still plugged straight into front of house, which is in the little box round the corner. But then we're taking that extra output, which is the headphones, and plugging it into there. So we're sort of jerry-rigging it a little bit. Yeah, That's a great question. I forgot to talk about the drums, so thank you. Anyone else?
I was just going to say the drums Fox, me and Roger didn't know entirely because they work differently. Everything else goes into there.
Yeah.
The drums still go into the wall to get to the sound desk.
Yeah.
The drums go in as an instrument to the front, but then you've got your own drum control pad that comes out the back for the drummer to control his volumes. So they are a mess compared to the others.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, that's a great point. So the drums don't go into this stage box. They go into another stage box just over there, which is conveniently labeled drum left and drum right. I think the bass guitar also goes there, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Before you go tonight, you might just want to go and have a look just behind that pillar.
Yeah.
And you'll see where they plug in there. And you're right, it's 2 inputs for drums, 1 for bass guitar, and they're labelled.
Yeah. Great. I'll take some photos of those actually, and I'll put them on the leaflet and update it and send it over to you. Because everything else does go there. So that's just another one of those quirky things you need to remember or look up in the booklet.
But then the bass guitar still plugs into the wall from that box.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, so it's because of the way that the electronic drums work, they're going straight into that wall socket, and then we're taking that headphone output, so there's technically 3 outputs, confusing, whereas you're very right, the bass will go into the box, then back out the box into the wall using the sort of horseshoe effect of the DIs down here. That way the bass can hear themselves, and it comes out front of house.
That was our one of our phone calls to you, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
One of several.
Yeah. But is there anything else? Any recaps? Any questions? Or no? Great. I suppose all you need to know is then just packing it down when everything is powered down, so you can't get any when you pull cables out. Just pull all the cables out.
If I can interrupt. So again, for those of you less experienced, when powering down, it's better to turn that top left blue switch off first, and then off at the desk, and then you can start dismantling.
Yeah, like you say. So speakers off, desk off, and then you can just start pulling the instrument cables out the front. So this wants to be all clear, so that you can put the box back together. Taking all the earphone cables out, but then all these little microphone cables, they sit in the box, so you can just leave them as they are. You don't need to pull them out. It's just all of the external things that plug into it want to come out. And then it lives, when you put all the bits back together, it just lives around that corner behind all the fold backs, unless it stays there. But, you can always chat to Roger about that. So,
Yeah, we usually put that, literally just around the corner there. That's great. Elliot, thank you so much.
It's all right.
We're just slightly over time now, so unless there's anything else, we'll call
that was a
halt there.
whistle-stop tour, so if you're a little bit lost, don't worry. I've written it all up, so you can view that at your leisure.
And we have the video recording.
And you have the video.
Yeah. We could do a sequel afterwards. Thank you. Thank you very much, Elliot.
No problem.